True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the haven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthy and how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how the first idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none, passion there was none. I loved that old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. It was this. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue eye with film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually. I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. Every night, about midnight, I turned the latch on his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made a sufficient opening for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light showed out, and then I thrust my head in. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it so slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him lay upon his bed. Ha! Well, what a madman would be so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. For the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye, and I did this for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, before I found the eye always closed, it was impossible to do the work, for not the old man who had vexed me, but his evil eye. Every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber, and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he has passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him as he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more usually cautious than when I was opening the door. A watchman at hand moved more quickly than I did with mine. Never before that night have I felt the extent of my own powers, my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he had not even dreamed of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved in his bed suddenly, as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was pitch black as with the thickness of dark, for the shutters were closed fastened through the fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open up the lantern, when my thumb slipped the tin fastening. The old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept still, and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle. In the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up on the bed, listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches on the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan. I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or relief. Oh no! It was a slow, stifled sound that arose from the bottom of his soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night just before midnight, when the world slept, it had welled up from my own bosom, deepening its dreadful echo. The terrors that distracted me, I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at the thought. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since that first light noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It's nothing but the wind in the chimney. It's only a mouse crossing the floor. Or it's merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with those suppositions, but he found it all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked him with his black shadow before him, enveloping the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he never saw or heard, but to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it, you cannot imagine how stealthily, until a single dim ray, like a thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice, and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw its perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil that chilled my very marrow of my bones. But I did not see nothing else of the old man's face, or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon that damned spot. And I have not told you for what mistakes for madness, but over acuteness of the sense. Now I say there came to my ears a low, quick sound, such as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier to courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed and held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could to maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, louder and louder with every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder with every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you how nervous I am. And so I am. And now, at the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of the old house, so strange a noise this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now with anxiety seized me, the sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, but only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled, gaily, to find the deed so far done. But many minutes later, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you think me mad, then you will no longer think so when I describe what wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I woke hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. cut off the head and the arms and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha! When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what do I have now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged by the police officer, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what do I have to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was in my own dream. The old man I mentioned was absent from the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them to search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and disturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in a wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat at the very spot which I reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, while I answered cheerily. They chatted of familiar things. But ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But they still sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distant. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued to gain in definiteness, until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt now I grew very pale, but I talked much more fluently, with a high in voice, yet the sound increased. What could I do? It was a low, quick sound, as much sound as a watch would make when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles, in a high key and violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose all over, and continuously increased. It grew louder and louder and louder, and the men chatted pleasantly, and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This, I thought, and this is what I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt I must scream now or die. And now, again, hark, louder, and louder. Villains, I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks here. It is the beating of this hideous heart. I would like to thank you all for listening. This is going to be my attempt at having a regular series. 31 Days of Fright. For the entire month of October, I'm going to try to have one story out every single day. So I hope you all enjoy, and stay tuned for more. Bye.